you. Hello, and welcome to the afternoon. We're all the way getting into it. All right, so before we get into 4 secrets that conscious entrepreneurs know, I want to step away from microphone feedback. I want to get to know who's here. So we're going to play a little game. And the game goes like this. I'm going to read a sentence, and if it is true for you, you're going to stand up, assuming that's available to you. If it's not, then indicate some other way, raise a hand. But if I say a sentence and it's true for you, I invite you just to stand up. Then when we're done, I invite you, look around the room, see if perhaps there's a kindred spirit, or see if there's a mentor, someone who you'd like to connect with later. Then I'll say thank you. That's your clue to sit back down. So if you want to move your chair away from the table so you can stand up and sit down with ease, certainly feel free. To get the hang of it, question number 1, invite you to stand if you are right-handed. There are quite a number of lefties who may or may not be high-fiving. All right, you got the hang of it. Thank you. Invite you to stand up if it's hard for you to be out of the office for 2 days. Yeah. And notice who's with you. Notice who's having an easeful time. There might be some tips or tricks that you want to learn from them. Thank you. A variation on the question, but something slightly different. Invite you to stand up if you are good at taking weekends off. Awesome. Look around. You might ask people what they do on those weekends when they're off. Thank you. Invite you to stand up if you are a parent. And stay standing if you are the parent of teenagers. Fascinating, right? Kindred spirits across the room. Thank you. Invite you to stand up if you consider yourself a millennial. Multi-generational conversations are some of my favorite that I've been hearing recently. So I invite you to have a conversation with somebody who isn't either standing or sitting, whatever you are doing. Thank you. Invite you to stand up if you consider yourself skeptical. Yes. Welcome, skeptics. I am so grateful for you. I like to distinguish between skepticism and cynicism. Cynicism is when I sit on the side of a conversation and I just throw bombs into the middle of it. That's not that useful. Skepticism invites us to think harder, to ask more discerning questions, to challenge our assumptions. Welcome, all skeptics. Thank you. Invite you to stand up if your company is your identity. Yeah, it took people a second to catch up, but they're with you. And just to recognize what's that experience like for you. Notice if there's a story that's happening inside around whether that's right or wrong or good or bad, and just to notice how it is. Thank you. Invite you to stand up if you have a presencing practice. That could be meditation, that could be prayer. For some people, that's running. This is a fabulous get-to-know-you question if you're tired of hi, my name is Kaley. Nice to meet you. Where are you from? This is a great question. What's your presencing practice? Thank you. Invite you to stand up if, true confessions, you sometimes use sarcasm instead of having direct conversations. Excellent. Thank you. They sat down really fast after that one. And invite you to stand up if just in general you avoid conflict. You know yourselves. Yeah. Look around. Who's with you? Some mentors. Thank you. All right, a couple more. Invite you to stand up if you consider yourself an introvert. Notice this is a continuum, right? You tip on the side of introversion, get your energy solo. When they're not at the roof deck party right away, we'll know what happened. Thank you. On this one, I invite you to stand if you are more of an external processor. Internal processors think to speak. External processors speak to think. I invite you just to look around. This is an interesting question. Thank you, friends. This is a really interesting question if you haven't had the conversation on your team to see how people prefer to learn and think. It gives you a lot of insight into who your brainstorming partners out loud are going to be and who wants to take a conversation, think on it overnight, and come back to you. Invite you to stand if you find that your vision is far ahead of your team's ability to execute. Yeah, look around. You are not alone. You might find a friend to have a conversation later. Thank you. Invite you to stand up if you are creative. And if you're sitting, invite you to notice the story you're telling yourself about creativity. Thank you. All right, a couple more. I think this is actually the last one. I invite you to stand if you have at least one person that you will seek out to have a follow-up conversation. This is the part where you're all supposed to stand. Beautiful, thank you. For our exploration, today we're gonna have a number of conversations at our table, and this is the first one. So I'm gonna give you just a couple minutes at your table to have a conversation. If you find you're solo at your table, go find a table. I know that they would welcome you. Questions like, who did you connect with? Like, wow, this entrepreneurship thing is really hard if you're a parent. He was saying, don't start a company with 2 small kids, right? Or what were you surprised by, or what else would you wanna know? Conversation at your table. You have 2 minutes. On your marks, get set, go. If you don't like these questions, ask your own. All right, team, we're coming back. One of the other questions that I like to consider is which of these questions might you want to borrow for your own team? Feel free to use anything that is useful here with any of the teams that you lead, any of the other groups that you are part of. Everything here is for your sharing and taking. Lopa set this up beautifully. We are going to explore 2 of the commitments of conscious leadership. We're going to take a look at 4 of those secrets. And the first one that we're going to take a look at is curiosity. Then we're going to take a look at responsibility. We're going to build on that with sharing authentically. And finally, we're going to take a look at what it means to believe. So starting with the first, engaging with curiosity. I love the model of the line. Who's familiar with the 15 commitments of conscious leadership and the line? Awesome. There's like a whole table over there. That's incredible. The reason that this model is one of my most favorites is because of its simplicity and yet how often it provides such profound insight. The big idea here is that above the line, I'm committed to curiosity, openness to learning. And when I fall below the line, I become defensive or closed or more committed to being right than to learning. And so in a moment, we're going to play a little game where you get to look at your own strategies, what it looks like, what it feels like when you go below the line versus when you're above the line. Sometimes I think it's easier to notice other people. When you notice defensiveness, what kinds of things do you notice? Feel free to shout it out for me. What kinds of things do you notice when people are defensive? Body language, absolutely. Yeah, you cross my arms. And I might also give some tone. Oh no, I'm so curious about why you would say something so stupid, right? Yes, speaking loudly, interrupting, awesome. What else? Sarcasm, definitely. What else happens when you get defensive or you fall below the line? What happens? You don't ask questions, you talk over, definitely. What else? Yes. You shut down, right? There's aggressive defensiveness, right? Like best defense is a good offense. And then there's also the withdraw format. There's nobody here. Yeah, excellent. And so as we look at this, we've done some of these. There's body language defensiveness. Sometimes there's the rolling your eyes. Defensiveness can look like gossip or triangulating. Can you believe that? Sometimes it's just a giving up that will show up in defensiveness. And so what I want to invite you to do is also notice when you get triggered. I thought it was really perfect that Gail earlier today was talking about introversion and extroversion. I am a self-proclaimed extrovert. I love being with people. I'm the crazy person who, after a full day of being at a conference, I call my husband and I'm like, this was the greatest. Here are all the people I met. Here are all the stories that I heard. Right, all the introverts are dying inside. So what happened, and the story behind this slide, is that one of my executive coaching clients was getting really curious about the relationship between introversion and extroversion on her team, and so she forwarded me this article. And I highlighted the part where I triggered myself, which said that introverts are really good listeners and extroverts are really good talkers. Now, perhaps surprising that as someone who literally talks for a living, I got as defensive as I did, but I was like, you should ask my clients. I'm a really good listener. You should ask my best friend. I'm really good at listening. And just to notice that I had made listening better than talking. Anybody who is thinking back to the notion of comparison is the thief of joy, one of my favorite quotes, is to notice, how do I trigger myself? Where do I create comparison? Where do I create scarcity? How do I trigger myself? And when I do, what do I do? And so for you, on your table, hopefully, there's a handout that has a line. And above the line, you'll find curiosity, and below the line, you'll find defensiveness. And in that left-hand column, you'll find mindset, which we have talked about extensively today. What are the beliefs that I hold when I fall below the line? What are the beliefs that I hold when I'm above the line? What are the behaviors that I do when I'm defensive? What are the behaviors that I do when I'm curious? These statements are indicators. It's not that if you say the word why, it means you're below the line. It's that usually when I'm asking why questions, it's because I'm below the line. Why would you ask me that? Right? Indicator I'm defensive. Similarly, just because you say I'm curious doesn't mean you're above the line, but it's an indicator that I'm thinking in possibilities. And so for now, I want to invite you to get curious about your own recipe. What does it look like for you when you fall below the line? What does it look like for you when you get defensive? And what are ways that you authentically make the shift? So I'm going to give you another 2 minutes at your table. Maybe because I'm feeling so generous, I'll give you 4. To have a conversation, what patterns do you notice when you get defensive? To also notice ways you trigger yourself and the common things that you do. Ready at your table? On your marks, get set, go. 1 minute warning if we're missing any friends at our table. All right, team. Whoever's talking, we're going to give them the opportunity to finish their sentence. As I was eavesdropping, a few things that I heard that I loved. As I was eavesdropping, one of the things that I heard was, I'm going to have to ask my partner what my pattern is. That sometimes we're not even sure what we do, and so being in that kind or that quality of conversation that somebody else could say, hey, I notice that one of your tells, it's almost like we're playing poker, one of your tells when you're defensive is, you start saying, the fact is, or whatever it is. The other thing that I heard that I really appreciated, and I want to borrow from Nicole's presentation earlier today, is that awareness gives us choice. That one of the reasons to get curious about our own patterns, one of the reasons to even look at a sheet like this, to put it somewhere nearby where I can ask myself on a regular basis, where am I? Am I above the line or below the line? Hi, notice I'm triggered in this conversation. What's happening for me is because that awareness at least opens the possibility that I could make a shift, that I could do something different. If I don't even know that it's happening, I'm out of luck. I want to be really careful in how I share this model with you because I think I sometimes make a mistake. That sometimes I present this information as though being above the line is good and being below the line is bad. And I don't actually believe that to be true. I think that above the line gives us choices and possibilities and outcomes that aren't available when we're below the line. But what's most important is that we know where we are. Because if I'm trying to collaborate, if I'm trying to be creative, if I'm trying to innovate and I'm below the line, good luck, friends. But if I don't even know that I'm there, I can't do something different. As we move to our next step, thank you, Lopa, for teeing this up so beautifully. The second piece that I want to share is that building on curiosity, conscious leaders take 100% responsibility. So for this next section, I would love for everyone to also play with me. First, invite you to think of a complaint. You will need to tell your table eventually, so choose something rated, I don't know, whatever PG or R version you're willing to share with your table. And now I want us to think about what happens when we're not taking 100% responsibility. When we're in drama, who do we need? To have any good drama, who do we need? What are our characters? A victim, yes, and a villain. And whom else? A hero. And so as we look at each of these three characters in more detail, I would love for everyone to get ready to win an Oscar. The first character that we're going to look at is the victim. The victim's glasses that they wear in the world is that life is happening to me. I am at the effect of. Now, I could be at the effect of a person. I could be at the effect of a situation. I could be at the effect of inflation. But to try on victimhood, I need everyone on the count of 3 to do your best victim facial expression, posture, and if there's a sound effect, sound effect. Are we ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh, that was so good. What happened to your energy? Plummets, right? That my experience of that victim place in the drama triangle is it's like the air was let out of my tires. all the energy gets dropped away. That when I'm taking less than 100% responsibility through the glasses of victimhood, it's hard, right? It's often too much. I'm overwhelmed, I'm powerless, there's nothing that I can do. And then we need a villain. So change gears, are you ready? Villains are all about blame. And I can blame out there, you did it. If I'm a politician, I have to point with my thumb. It was the other side. Sometimes I point here in the inner critic. Kaley, I can't believe you said that. That was so dumb. All right, everybody familiar with your inner critic? So blame and the villain can go out, blame and the villain can go in. On the count of 3, we need our villain, facial expression, posture, sound effect. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. You. Oh, Brian has a grimace, friends. I would not get in the way of that. Right? What happened to your energy? Shot up. There's a brief moment of adrenaline. Everybody felt that? Right? And you can feel that moment of righteousness. I am right, and you are wrong, and there is a problem out there. And I'm going to find who did it, and I'm going to blame them for it. For a brief second, it's going to feel so good. All right, we need the hero. Everybody ready? The hero is our last character. The hero is the one that creates temporary relief. And so the hero is the one who, in our metaphor, right? You need a fish, you need a fish, you need a fish, you need a fish. I keep delivering those to you. I never teach you how to fish, and heaven forbid I equip you with a pole and some bait. And yet there's a moment that it creates a perpetual cycle. So hero creates temporary relief. We need one last time. Facial expression, sound effect, posture. For this one, you might have to stand up. Just create room if you need to. Ready? On the count of 3, hero. 1, 2, 3. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, yes, the standing was excellent. Alex was good. And so the big idea in hero is that it doesn't last. That's the issue with hero. In the moment, jumping in, helping a friend, doing a favor, that's fantastic. The issue with hero is that it's temporary relief. And so in that pattern, we actually create interdependencies. That in order for me to be a victim, I require there to be a villain. To be a villain, I require a victim, right? They work together. Who do I require if I'm a hero? A victim. And it's one of the hardest things I've found in myself to recognize that in that moment where it feels so good to be the hero, unintentionally, I require the other person to be operating in victim. Now, I have yet to meet the leader. Pull me aside afterward if this is you. I have yet to meet the leader who says, Kaley, wake up in the morning, I have my coffee and my tea or my kombucha, and then I think to myself, how can I systematically disempower my team today? That's not what happens. And yet, as I approach my work through this lens of hero, that's unconsciously what I do. And so we're going to take a look at a couple different examples. And as you think about your situation, your complaint, I'm going to invite you on the flip side of your page to get curious about how you might be playing one or many of these different roles. So example number 1 that I ran into recently, who was telling me that it's always IT's fault? Yeah, right? It's always IT fault. So what happened? The server went down, and I'm talking with this team, and they are lamenting the loss. This is terrible. All my work is lost. This is going to be a disaster. We're not going to be able to build it back. And then they started to blame IT. I'm completely at the effect of our broken, antiquated systems, and I can't believe that you aren't building them faster and better. Right? And IT says, you should have known better. Well, you didn't notice the system was crashing all the time? Well, you think you can build this system? Good luck. Right? And then this was my favorite. This really happened. Somebody's like, I know a hacker who can get into our systems and get all of our data back. It's like, you're not concerned about security if that's something that you can easily do? You see the interdependence? All 3 roles. The next one shows up most frequently in the ones that I see. This one is around talent. that there's someone on the team who I experience is not doing excellent work. And then I create myself at the effect of them. We can't grow as fast as we need to grow. I mean, our head of sales, they're not doing their work. And we actually, our audit, it's behind, we're not gonna make it. I'm at the effect of all these people who aren't doing their work. And then I start to blame. And I'm mad all the time. Why are you not performing? And maybe I can just like blame you into doing better. And then they jump in and they say, I'll just do all your work for you, right? It's so hard to train someone. I don't actually have time to go hire. Have you all seen this labor market? I mean, really, trying to hire here, this is just so impossible. I'll stay up till midnight. All of our panelists are like, I'll just do all their work for them. Has anybody seen this movie before? I see some nodding. Excellent. And so the question for you, and you can share at your table, but do your own inquiry first, is as you think about your complaint, what roles are you playing? Hint, most of the time we're playing all three in some version. On your marks, get set, go. You got it? Yeah? Okay. All right, 30-second warning. All right, we are coming back. And so similarly to the question of, are you above or below the line? The reason to do the work around where am I in the drama triangle is that it gives me a lot of insight into what shifts might be possible. It starts to give me insight into how I could find a way out. Whereas, has anybody ever seen a family situation or work situation where the drama is running rampant and people look around and they're sort of like, I don't understand how this thing keeps happening over and over again, right? You're like, who's talking about being the common denominator of their experience, right? That there's something like, you actually are the key ingredient. When I notice where I am, it gives me more choices. Now, I want to nuance this for a second. The font on this slide is small. Not every situation is drama. Occasionally when people learn the drama triangle, they're like, oh my goodness, I spend my whole life in drama. Maybe, but let's nuance it a little bit. That it is actually not drama. You are not in villain if you are challenging someone. It becomes drama when it starts to create a culture of fear and blame. It is not drama to hold accountability. It is drama when it starts to feel like there's no motivation and everyone is doing CYA. In the same way that in victimhood, sometimes things happen, right? My experience of Alex telling the story this morning around, and I woke up to no laptop, that's not a story of victimhood. That's a story of shit happened. And the question was, what can I do about it? And feeling the difference that there are some folks who keep telling the same story over and over and over without taking any action. That's the difference between something happened and victimhood. Similarly, hero is not when you do something kind for someone. I once knew someone who took this, in my judgment, a little too far, where they were like, so I had to stop being nice because I was heroing all the time. It's like, that's not actually hero. Doing something kind, jumping in to help someone, actually sustainably creating a solution, that's not hero. We know it's hero when it requires the other person to step into victimhood. We know it's hero when it becomes a pattern where it requires you to jump in over and over as a pattern. And so as we look at where we are, it's helpful to start to notice when I catch myself in a place of victim mindset, how do I make a shift? And not every single one of these will work in every situation. Sometimes it's that I've identified myself as powerless, and the question is, what does it look like if I believe myself to be powerful? And sometimes that's not the question. Sometimes there's a different question where I'm telling myself I have to. And instead I might ask, okay, well, what initiative do I get to take? What choices are available? But using these as options helps give you opportunities. Similarly, as you look at villain, if I'm catching myself blaming, how could I instead get clarity? Sometimes that's not what's going on. Sometimes it's that there's a bunch of shoulding happening out there. Anybody should on themselves? Right? That instead I might get curious about clean agreements. So getting clear about when I know where I am on the triangle. This gives me more possibilities. Last shift moves. When I see others as less than, can I see them as equals? This is my reliable go-to when I'm in hero, is to recognize, how have I created this situation where this person is unable to do what I think they should be able to do? What's my role in that? Variation on one of the questions Jerry asked earlier today. And so as you consider these shifts, if you've recognized yourself in the drama triangle in your last conversation, I'm going to give you 30 seconds just on your own. What's one shift that you could make back to 100% responsibility? 30 seconds just for you. What's one shift you could make to come back to 100% responsibility? That might be one of the things that showed up on a prior slide. It might not be. It might just be telling someone my truth. 30 seconds on your marks, get set, go. Yes. You guys good? Totally. All right. If in your situation you looked at it and you went, I know for sure that I'm in drama and I don't know how to make a shift back to 100% responsibility, that's okay. I want to distinguish between I don't know and I'm not willing. There is a huge difference between I don't know how, I'm open for coaching, what do you see that I don't see, and I'm not willing. I share this with you as leaders because in my experience, as you step into coaching roles for folks on your teams, you'll start to notice, wow, there's drama here. And it might even be easy to spot from the outside. All right, so-and-so is playing victim and so-and-so is playing villain. Okay, I see the hero role, and you'll go to coach them. And if you don't ask the question, are you willing to make a shift? It's actually just a different flavor of hero. All right, so 2 secrets down. We've got curiosity. We've got 100% responsibility. Secret number 3 is about sharing authentically. And there are 3 different flavors that I want to explore. Jerry actually did a different one than the 3 that I was going to look at, that he just dropped into revealing his own experience. That's one version. The version that I like to pay attention to is about asking for what I want. I am curious, by show of hands in the room, who has really excellent mind reading skills? Anybody? Who has been asked to read someone's mind without sufficient mind reading skills? Yes, most of us. One of the things I noticed, my ESP, my mind reading skills, are absolutely terrible. And yet there are often experiences where someone comes almost assuming that I already know what they're asking for, what their situation is, what they need. And if we don't get into a practice of asking each other for what we want, then we start to make assumptions. We start to solve problems that may or may not actually be there. We try to anticipate other people's needs. Usually we unskillfully address them, and then everybody's in sort of a resentment, mad, that didn't actually work kind of spiral. If you've never seen that movie before, I would like to hear from you. That in this experience, this is about setting the norms in the organization about how we ask for what we want. Because there's a tipping point where I could actually get into entitlement. I ask for what I want and you make that happen for me. It's not actually, in my judgment, very skillful. That instead this is being in the practice of, and this is the Rolling Stones, you don't always get what you want, but you might just get what you need. And so can there be a practice? Can I ask for what I want? Can there be a conversation? Can we then find a space where perhaps needs can be met, or we can come up with something more creative? And so in your own mind's eye, I invite you just to wonder, what haven't you asked for? Why? What story are you telling yourself? This might be, I haven't asked my board for 4-day work weeks. Why? Well, because I'm telling myself a story that they would think I was nuts rather than I was creating a new paradigm, right? I haven't asked for, everyone to come back to the office 3 days a week. Why? Because I believe we're going to lose some of our best people. Just to notice the storytelling. What haven't you asked for and why? What story are you telling yourself? Part 2 of revealing authentically is around owning mistakes. On the last panel, we were talking about failure or failing forward or making mistakes. I like to think about them mostly as just learning opportunities. I heard somebody say, I'm not actually sure where I heard it, that your options are to get it right the first time or to learn a lot. And part of entrepreneurship is a lot about learning as we go. What are the things that didn't work and how do I learn a lot? And in creating a culture of innovation, of growth, of conscious leadership is also around, am I willing to acknowledge when I made a mistake? Hey, I used language that wasn't as inclusive as it could have been. I'm sorry. Help me. To be able to say, hey, we tried a bonusing strategy. It didn't actually work. The retention numbers weren't the way that we wanted them to be. Shoot, what do you see in my blind spot that I didn't see in myself? To also be able to say, hey, we tried changing our product map midstream. It didn't work. I take responsibility for that. And other people in the room then are willing to also say, hey, I tried this, it didn't work. Are willing to say, hey, I made this mistake. Sometimes it's something really simple, sometimes it's larger scale, but as we generate a culture of being able to ask for what we want and own our mistakes, we start to learn more. So again, in your reflection, how are you sharing mistakes on your team? And how are you also learning from them? And if in this reflection there's a moment of, ooh, shoot, we're not, that's okay too. How can you integrate this question into something that perhaps becomes an actionable do different? Third piece of revealing authentically, this is a version of The Emperor's New Clothes. Who's read the book, The Emperor's New Clothes? For those of you who haven't read it recently, I have a 10-year-old kid, it's one of my favorite books. The story goes like this. There's an emperor and two swindlers come to the palace and they say, we are going to create for you the most magnificent new wardrobe. It will be beautiful and outstanding and it will have an added benefit. Only the people who are wise will be able to see this new clothing. And so the swindlers go away and they sew their imaginary clothes and they show up and they place them over the emperor. And then the emperor looks in the mirror and goes, oh shoot, I can't see anything. Maybe that means I'm not wise. Right? And so then he goes out into the palace grounds and talks to his advisors, and his advisors say, those are the most beautiful new clothes. I can't see anything, can you? No, don't tell anyone. Why? Because I don't want to risk being dumb. I don't want to risk being the only one who sees something. I don't want to risk being the person with a different perspective. One of the culminating event in this story is that the emperor goes out on parade in his little undies, and only a little kid is willing to shout out, but he's not wearing any clothes. At which point in time the crowd goes, oh my goodness, you're right, he's not wearing any clothes, and now we're all able to see. But it took someone willing to name it. It took someone willing to be courageous. It took someone willing to take a risk, to have a different perspective in order for others to come around and say, oh, you're right. That is what's true. And so to invite ourselves into those moments of where am I willing to risk a different perspective and how am I inviting other perspectives into my conversations? How am I creating a space where we get cognitive diversity? Where we get people who challenge our expectations. Because when we're able to have those differences in the same place, more often than not, we get to a more skillful answer. Alex mentioned my side hustles that I write about marriage. Deviation for just 1 second. The skills around revealing are critically important in our intimate relationships, not just as leaders on our teams. That in the interviews that we did, over 100 of them, what couples told us is that they were thriving when they had created a culture of radical generosity in their relationship, which was really about contribution. That's 80-80, striving to contribute at 80%. I get the math doesn't work. Appreciation, and most importantly for this conversation, revealing. That in our intimate relationships, often we don't risk that different perspective. We assume that we're still with the person that we met 20 years ago. And so the question that we come back to in either environment, we'll come back to entrepreneurship in our teams, is what have you not risked sharing and what have you not risked hearing? Whisper to your neighbor. Or tell them in a loud voice. What have you not risked sharing? What have you not risked hearing? What have you not asked for and why? Any of the reflections around sharing authentically. Share with your neighbor. It's like a test. My Marcus, that go. Minutes. I'll make it. All right, team. Last one. This is outside the literature of the 15 commitments of conscious leadership, but the more I hang out with conscious leaders, the more I see this quality. Conscious leaders believe. Who's ever heard of Sir Roger Bannister? Anybody? Right? He is famous for breaking the 4-minute mile. Here's the history. Keep me honest. The way that I understand it, the world record stood at 4 minutes and 1 second for something like 40 years. And people at this point in time were actually starting to believe it was dangerous to run faster than a 4-minute mile. You shouldn't try. Your lungs might explode. Medical experts all got on board. Sir Roger Bannister, he was like, nah, I believe it's possible. Now, he didn't sit on the couch and believe it was possible. There was no standing in front of a mirror and imagining. Instead, he trained, he learned medicine, and then he went out and he did it. Broke the world record, became 3 minutes and 57 seconds. This is what I think is incredible. It was only then a matter of days before it was broken again by an Australian runner, that once the paradigm shifted to let us know that it was possible, more was possible. Why this becomes so relevant for leaders is because our brains are being wired by what we tell it is possible all the time. So it's called the reticular activating system, RAS. And basically what it does is it tells our brains what do we want to keep and what do we want to delete. It's like the everyday file sorter. Yep, we're going to hold on to that one. Nope, that one goes in the trash. Delete the trash so it's empty. Why this becomes important is because what we're feeding our brains on a regular basis actually determines what becomes possible. Because if I hold, this is why vision boards work, by the way. It's the reticular activating system. When I tell my brain what to sort for, unconsciously, that's what I see in my environment. And when that's what I see, that's what I move toward. This is like the race car corner. This is like all my Colorado ski friends. If you look at the trees, you hit the tree. If you look for the spaces, you ski through the spaces. And so for all of us, this is also really important because our brains are wired to do hard things. Everyone is familiar with neuroplasticity. They're also now proving neurogenesis. That you actually create new things in your brain when you do things that are hard. Now, if you do the same thing over and over, you create a superhighway. That's cool. But until you do something that you can't do, until you challenge yourself through exposure, through practice, through experiments, if you're not doing something that feels uncomfortable, you're actually just reinforcing a rut. And this could be anything. This could be thinking differently. This could be taking a hip hop class. This could be learning a new language. This could be building a business. That as we do things we haven't done before, and we get the mentorship, the camaraderie, the friendship, then we start to change what becomes possible. And as we change what we believe is possible, we actually change what becomes possible for our teams and our organizations. When we do all four of these things, when we engage with curiosity, when we take responsibility, when we share authentically, when we believe, my experience is that creates not only conscious leadership, it creates conscious culture. And in those environments, everyone grows. At the break, I encourage you to have a conversation about what your flavor of conscious leadership looks like. This is not a one-size-fits-all. This is a choose-your-own adventure. And as you do that, to engage all the other people who are here learning with you, because I believe what we create together is even more powerful than what we do alone. Thanks for being with me.